Hi, this is Caroline Manny. I am doing a re-recording of our writing research assignments presentation because when Dr. Becky Briley and I did the presentation together, unfortunately, we could not get the recording to work on Zoom. It kept dropping out due to network issues. So I am re-recording it. Unfortunately, that means that we weren't able to capture all the great discussion amongst the faculty and Becky's particularly expert wording of some of the topics that we discussed, but at least we will be capturing the essence of this presentation by re-recording it. So let's get started. This presentation is about writing a good research assignment. It's not about how to teach students how to write per se, but it's about us as faculty members writing the actual assignment in the best way possible in order to solicit the best work and the best understanding from the students. So let's go ahead and get started. As we proceed through this, what we asked the faculty members at the presentation was to think of a writing assignment that they have done in the past, either one that was greatly successful or one that wasn't particularly successful, but one that they thought they could improve. And think about the topics we're going to discuss and whether any of those would help them improve it. And two, we asked the faculty members to think about whether in order to improve writing overall in their particular discipline, this presentation might give them ideas for places where they might add writing assignments so that there were more writing assignments distributed throughout the major courses. We start out with an example of a real assignment from a 400 level class that I pulled from a anonymous class, and the assignment was conduct a literature review of current research on a topic appropriate for this class. Review at least 20 scholarly articles. Obviously, we changed this assignment to make it an anonymous assignment, adding appropriate for this class instead of giving some more specific details that would have revealed which class this was for. But what we asked everybody to do in the workshop was we had a couple of minutes of discussion of what might be done to improve this assignment just off the top of everybody's head, because this is a pretty typical assignment if you look at the assignments that are often, the writing assignments that are often given here at Midway. This is a pretty common example of what an assignment looks like. And there's nothing wrong with this assignment. The students can do it, obviously, but it could probably have some elements added to it that would make it better. Overall, what we conclude looking at this is that the way that this assignment is currently worded makes some assumptions that the students, number one, know what a literature review is and know how to write one. They know what a topic appropriate for this class would be without any further help. They know what a scholarly article is without any further help. And even at the 400 level, these aren't necessarily assumptions that you can safely make, because you can't be certain what students have done in previous classes to know that they have even defined a literature review, much less looked at one or written a basic version of one. You can't even be certain that they can define the difference between a scholarly source and a popular source. So we can get a little more detailed. And the purpose of this presentation is to give you some ideas of ways in which you could and should get more detailed. The first suggestion that we give is to be sure to include in your writing assignment the purpose of the writing assignment. In our original example of a writing assignment, the purpose of the writing assignment was to create a literature review. So that was in there. Further definition of exactly what that means and possibly the inclusion of an example of a literature review probably would be helpful. Other purposes of a writing assignment would be maybe in a lower level class, things such as, is this writing assignment informational? In other words, the students are only supposed to explore a topic and gather information about it and present the information. Or are they being required to state and defend or support a thesis? Another purpose of a writing assignment for an upper level class, other than a literature review, might be to write an annotated bibliography, either as a standalone assignment or as part of an ongoing writing assignment. Again, probably some definition of what exactly an annotated bibliography is and what its purpose is important. The second topic that we discussed that you would want to include in an excellent writing assignment would be complete information about the basic requirements of the assignment. For example, in the writing assignment that we used as a sample when we started out, the number of sources was specified. So number of sources is definitely one of the basic requirements of the assignment. The example assignment also specified that the type of source acceptable was a scholarly source. So talking about the types of sources is another basic requirement that's very important. Probably discussing the difference between a popular source, a trade source, a scholarly source would be part of that basic requirements. You may also want to include information about when it's appropriate to use primary versus secondary sources and discuss with students what the difference is between a primary and secondary source, because they probably don't know. Another basic requirement that you might include in your writing assignment is the length of the paper. Now, Dr. Briley and I recognized in the presentation that specifying the length of the paper can be a controversial topic, because if you tell the student it needs to be 5 pages or 10 pages or 3 pages, then you're kind of setting up the hoop that they have to jump for, rather than having them think about what information needs to be in the paper in order to make it a good paper. So we get that you may not even necessarily specify at the beginning the length of the paper, but you may tell the students as you develop your paper topic, then we can discuss what components need to be included in the paper and what components probably could be taken out of your first draft in order to arrive at an appropriate length. And lastly, you will want to include as a basic requirement in your assignment the due dates. And I've said dates plural because one of the things that we'll be recommending later on in this discussion is that rather than just taking a final draft of the paper on a particular due date, that there should be stages or increments in the assignment that have varying due dates. But we'll come back to that later. The next thing that we discussed during our presentation that might be included in the assignment itself are the grading criteria. So in other words, if you grade with a rubric, you may want to supply the rubric to the students along with the assignment. If you give grades, point values to the different increments of the assignment, then you want to tell the students how many points are each increment worth, so that they know what the value of the different stages of the assignment are. We also discussed in the presentation the fact that it's often difficult to grade lengthy writing assignments, especially when you've got a class of 80 people, and it seems even more daunting to grade a writing assignment if we're now starting to talk about the fact that there need to be increments or stages of the writing assignment turned in at varying points through the semester so that you're grading the same writing assignment multiple times. And Dr. Briley's suggestion when we were talking about that was that if, for example, you have the students turn in an annotated bibliography and a first draft in which the students don't worry at all about grammar and whatnot, but just simply get their ideas organized and perhaps include the citations, a synthesis summary of the citations that they're going to use to support their organized arguments, then that will help you deal with all the structural issues that you see if you're just looking at a final draft, and that'll make the final draft easier. And you don't have to worry at this point about talking about the grammar and the spelling in the paper. You're just looking at organization. So you can just make some general comments and improve the overall organization and evidentiary support of the arguments. And then if you have the students turn in a first draft that's fully written in a good effort, although maybe not fully successful effort at good grammar and good spelling and whatnot, then you can look for patterns of those types of problems and just mark the first few of those types of problems in the rough draft and tell the student, explain what the problem is and tell the student that they need to look for it throughout the rest of the paper. And that puts the onus on them to correct it. And so then if you do that, then you get a final draft that will actually grade faster. So that was Becky's suggestion about trying to deal with the burden of grading. The next tip that we give about writing a good writing assignment is to give a schedule of due dates for the assignment increments. And at that point, we gave an example of two different assignments. One was for a lower level class and one was for an upper level class. And the components of the writing assignment were, for example, stage 1, at the end of the second week due date, turn in your topic proposal. And then maybe the next step was to do some exploratory research and come back on another due date with the thesis statement that you were going to defend or the hypothesis that you were going to test, depending on the type of class. And then come back on another date with an annotated bibliography of X number of sources that you had read and explored while further researching your topic and that you were going to need to support your arguments in your paper. And so the annotation of the citations would be then to explain how those scholarly articles would support the actual research being done. And then the discussion with the student at that point would be, well, you don't have any scholarly articles to support this argument or any statistics to support that statement and so forth, so that you can start identifying helping the students with what they still needed in the paper. And then maybe the next component would be an outline, which included the structure of the paper and the arguments and the evidence that would accompany those arguments. So again, you could see at least a citation that they have something to back up their arguments. And then a first draft, and then a final draft with that should be as perfect as the student can make it, and different dates for all of those. And that was pretty much everything that we talked about during this session. Unfortunately, as I said, we weren't able to capture the discussion and questions, and we're sorry for that, but we hope that this re-recording gave you some general ideas.